since we didn't have the typical fees and cost of, buying food and everything for each event that we did, we had the money to spend it on actually getting like an actual leveled up webinar license, so we can gain more control over the actual seminar that's going on.
Yeah,
so it gives you a lot more little tricks and tools to use and all that. But I know.
Might as well start, Ben, when you're ready.
Yeah. So hey everybody, my name is Benjamin Miller, and this is Libby Storer, and she was a previous UH graduate, I believe 2017, and you've been working with Shell for the past couple of years since then. And you've been working off the coast of in the Gulf of Mexico, and also the Eastern Caribbean and Tobago area. And she came back. She was here last year, and she gave a great little talk, and they gave me encouragement. I was in the audience. I don't know if you remember or not. Gave me encouragement, and I actually like, okay, there's a chance. This is how I can do it. So I was like, oh, we got to get Libby back and got to give her a chance to get this to other students. So I really appreciate you coming, and I'll let you start off.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm just so glad to be here and speak with y'all. I think that it's a lot of fun to come back to U of H and get to know who's here and let you know some of my own tips that I learned in my own job hunting process. So that, feel free to interrupt me as we go through this. I'm going to try to keep my presentation pretty short here because last year, the best part of the presentation for me was the Q&A at the end. So I see that there's a nice Q&A box here on the Zoom chat. So please just go ahead and drop your questions in there or interrupt me. And we'll try to leave at least like the next, I'll maybe give a 15 or 20 minute presentation, if not a little shorter. And we'll just leave the rest up for discussion because I want to hear what is on your mind and what you'd love to bounce ideas off of. So don't bother with the Menti. You can just drop questions here in Zoom. So if you can see my presentation here, this is really similar to the one you saw last year, maybe a little bit more tailored for this COVID world where you can't quite grab coffee with someone in person. But really the whole premise of this talk is that, going beyond the black hole of resume submissions and trying to think about how can you get the competitive advantage of getting your entry-level jobs in a really challenging, economy and climate. That was true last year. We are in the middle of an oil and gas downturn. It's even more so this year with the additional challenges of the pandemic and just the economy. So I know that this is probably weighing pretty heavily on all of your minds. Let's see. So thank you for that great introduction. I am a development geophysicist working for Shell. I've been there for about 2.5 years, and I got my job right after graduating from U of H. So I would like to point out the opinions in this presentation are those of my own, not necessarily Shell's. I will give you the most honest and transparent answers that I can as far as what I think it takes to get a job, but I don't necessarily have hiring ability. But I think that it's still worth for us to chat and to, if you want to bounce ideas, let's do it. All right, so my career, we'll just start with there. So before, in 2014, I graduated from LSU, go Tigers, and I got bachelor's in petroleum engineering and geology. I was able to internship in New Mexico as well as Alaska by utilizing some of LSU's career development groups. And those internships helped me to eventually land a job at ConocoPhillips, where I was a completions engineer for about 2 years. During my time at Conoco, I got some operations experience. I was able to see how I could, I learned a lot about safety, a lot about frac jobs at being a completions engineer. But then I took some time to readjust my career and I decided to go back to school for a master's in geophysics. I did the professional program, and so that afforded me some time to get a contracting position with a very small company called Windy Cove Energy, which I worked as a petroleum engineer for them for about 6 months. And then through U of H, I was able to get an internship with Hess as a geophysicist. So my first geoscience role. From there, I was able to translate that into a job with Shell, where I've been a development geophysicist for about 2.5 years, as I've mentioned. So isn't that a clean story? That's so nice. This is just kind of a version of my pitch. This is how I describe myself when I meet new people, and I want to give them a grounding of what I've seen in the industry. But is it the full story? Absolutely not. No way. So let's go into the real story here. All right, so la-di-da-di-da, went to LSU, got the 2 bachelors, was able to use the job seeking tools at LSU to get my internships. This was really important for getting me my ConocoPhillips job. So as you can see here, I was a completions engineer for 2 years, and I did go out to the Bakken in Colorado during the downturn back in 2015. So I discovered going out to the field that it really wasn't my passion. I preferred being more in Houston, which was my home base, and I rotated for about 6 months and just found it really wasn't for me. Conoco decided it wasn't for me either because I faced a layoff then. So at that point in my career, I had a little under 2 years. I was in completions engineering, which I wasn't incredibly passionate about, and I thought, what do I do now? So I started applying. I did exactly, what my title here is. I threw a bunch of resumes into the black box that is any job and every job that I thought I might be kind of even a little bit eligible for. That didn't land me anything. So then I went to LinkedIn. I updated my profile and I started to reach out to people. That had varying success. Sometimes I would just reach out, hey, I see you're an LSU Tiger. I'm an LSU Tiger too. I would love to hear more about, in this example here, Rock Oil. Please tell me, a little bit more about what you guys do over coffee. But a lot of the times I didn't get a response. So I had varying success of getting to know how cold calling worked. It was awkward, but it was interesting. It led to some interesting introductions and let me learn more about the industry. But because I didn't really see a great trajectory, I said, you know what, let's go back to school. I'm not super passionate about this completions engineering anyway, but I've met a bunch of geologists and geophysicists during my time at Conoco, and so I wanted to explore that path, especially with the geology bachelors. So that's when I started the professional program at U of H. In the meantime, that was great that I did do the professional program because one of those LinkedIn cold calls actually ended up in a contracting position. I reached out to someone who was a friend of a friend, and they were looking for a really cheap, really green petroleum engineer to come and help them do some screens for their very small up-and-coming company, Windy Cove. So I got the introduction through an old vendor friend of mine. I was able to connect with Mark Peavy through LinkedIn, and that landed to that 6-month position where I learned a lot, and I got to see a totally different kind of company. I went from Conoco, which is a mid-size independent, to literally a 10-person company. It was great, and I learned a little bit. I got to flex some of that petroleum engineering and the geoscience. But unfortunately, small companies, there's a little bit more of a risk. So 6 months after I started, they lost their private equity funding. I had to start all over again back in 2016. Okay, oh gosh, I hate this job hunting. Well, we kept going. So I'm in my U of H program. I worked with the university recruiting, and I was able to get an internship with Hess. So this was my first real geoscience position. It was so exciting. Not only did working through U of H help me get this internship, but I don't have a screenshot of it. It's too old. But I did cold call one of the Hess recruiters, and I said, hey, I'd love to just find out more about this company. I'd love to introduce myself, and I'd love to hear about, the culture. around Hess. That was a great start, and I think that really helped to secure this internship. So that was really telling of like, oh, cool. I'm really glad that I've gotten to practice this pitch a couple of times, as well as the cold calling. So I worked at Hess. It was a fantastic experience. This was my first Gulf of Mexico exposure, and I really enjoyed it. But Hess, they unfortunately couldn't offer me a job at the end of the summer, just due to their own hiring constraints. So I'm back on the job grind. So I'm nearing the end of my time at U of H. I have about 1 semester left. I'm finishing up some of my research for my professional master's capstone project. So I say I need to meet as many people as possible. Let's make something happen because I'm about to lose my student status. I would really like to get a job when I graduate. So I threw myself into AAPG as well as Prowess, which is the AAPG Women's Network. Highly recommend for any of our women geoscientists listening, or any of the men who would like to, become an ally of sorts. So I got involved with AAPG. I reached out to one of my old Conoco friends and I said, hey, I've got a lot of time on my hands. I'm going crazy trying to do this job hunting stuff. Do you have any work that I could just throw myself into in the meantime? So she said, hey, we actually are putting an event together for conference. Can you make a commercial for it? And so in the right-hand corner, you can see a snippet from my YouTube commercial, which was a lot of fun and a great creative outlet to put some energy into while I was looking for jobs and going through the craziness of kind of trying to get a capstone together. Also during this time, I got to do a couple of other projects. The commercial springboarded to doing some interviews, which then they flipped the camera on me and said, hey, how about we interview you too? And I got to meet the AAPG president. I got to spend an entire day with the executive committee and take pictures and do some media stuff with them. It was great, and I got to meet a couple of more people in the industry, and that kind of energized me to keep on going. I also hustled it at the conference circuit. I went to SEG conference, I went to SPE conference, AAPG. At this point, I was nearing the end of my master's. I had the great Hess experience, and I knew I wanted to be a geophysicist. So I went out there and I hustled to say, hey, I'm an up-and-coming geophysicist. I've gotten my pitch down. I know what my strengths are. I've gotten a lot of really interesting experience. Who wants to hire me? During that time, I did meet with a lot of people, really similar to the LinkedIn cold calling. Sometimes there were some interesting leads. Sometimes there was, no response at all whenever I handed my resume into a booth. But there was kind of one interesting thing that happened there. So I go up to the Shell booth. I practiced my pitch a million times at this point, it feels like. And I speak to the recruiter. I say, hey, this is who I am in 2 minutes. Are you interested? And they said, well, we'll take a resume. I was able to talk to a couple of people at the booth. I had already done an online application to Shell. And I don't discredit that the following week was when I passed one of the stage gates after shaking hands with a couple of people at the SEG conference. But I was still on the job hunt. I had my Excel spreadsheet that you can see up here with all of my, I'm still in play for this job. I got my strong rejection from this job. I'm not really sure where this one is going. But this is only a handful of all of the jobs that I applied to. So I'm waiting. And the Shell stage gates, I kept passing, and eventually when I got to graduation, I got my Shell job offer. So it was a really happy ending, and I really enjoyed my time at Shell since then. But if you compare the last slide to this slide, there's quite a bit that goes into job hunting. Generally when you get these career backgrounds, you get people's highlights and maybe what they think is the most interesting part, but I think you've got to consider that getting a job is weaving a really busy, interesting tapestry together that eventually does make the perfect position for you. It helps you to find that and to set you up for the best possible way to present yourself for that role. So yeah, I would say kind of one of the overlying themes here is I know if you are job hunting, it seems like I've got to get the job to be interesting. But you want to keep yourself to be an interesting candidate kind of no matter what, right? And so you looking for a job should be just as interesting as you with a job. All right, so how do you set yourself up for success? I definitely named a couple of examples, but I'll just spell it out here on this slide. First and foremost, it is a lot easier to do job hunting when you know what you want and also when you are able to see what's really in reach. When I was in that really free-for-all period of like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be a petroleum engineer. I've just started this geophysics program. Maybe I'll be a geoscientist. Not having that focus, I think, really was to my detriment because, you know, you end up putting a little bit into a lot. And so really understanding what kind of role you want, thinking through what you would be good at. And, you know, whether you know that or not, it's still good to talk to people and try to understand so that you can know exactly what you should be shooting for. Give yourself a real tangible goal that's actually feasible, right? So the second one is to set up meaningful connections across the industry. And I've crossed out connections and networks because even though that's kind of the industry speak, really they should be something along the lines of friendships. So I want you to look around this virtual room right now, and hopefully you've already made a lot of friendships within SEG and within U of H. This is probably the busiest time of your life that you'll get to meet so many geoscientists all at once. So spend time deepening these relationships. And when you can, spread out and try to meet other people as well. And then, you know, the last of this number one is to build skills. You're obviously in school, you're doing research and learning a lot more about what's going to be your specific trade, and that's great. Also think through how to build up on your soft skills. Is there a talk that you can go and present your work at? Is there an opportunity for leadership? Is there a random opportunity to go help AAPG with a commercial? Really just look for opportunities to broaden yourself, stretch yourself, and you might learn something that you're good at, that's new, or even better, you'll learn something that you're not good at and you don't want to do. All right, so the next of this is to get out there, which I know is a bit challenging in this climate. But at the same time, I'm super impressed with the creative solution of socially distanced career talk via Zoom. So I think that this is a great example of how you can continue to get yourself out there. So when you do get someone on the line, you want your pitch to be great, right? You want to be able to say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm strong at, and say it in enough time that you've still engaged with someone and they're still they're going to be able to absorb all of that in a minute or two, right? So practice it. Get a friend, get someone that you trust, and just try to go over. Make sure that it's perfect so that when the right opportunity comes up, you have the best pitch possible and you're not, well, you know, I kind of did this research thing, but it wasn't, you know, it really didn't help me with this, or, you know, it wasn't relevant or to what I want to do. Practicing out loud is really, really helpful. But at the same time, as you're getting to know, you're reaching out and you're thinking about your career, make sure when you have those connections, it's not always about your pitch, or it's not always about exactly getting the job. You know, like I mentioned in the first bullet, you really want these meaningful connections to feel more like friendships. And so, of course, there's the give and the take. So there are definitely instances where you should go in and it should be all about you. But definitely, especially as you're trying to establish trust with somebody, especially someone who you hope can help to give you a job, start by learning more about them and asking questions. So just never forget that there is definitely that give and take aspect of networking. And you really want it to feel organic, and you want to have opportunities to build up trust with your connections. And the last of this point is cold calling. It is always uncomfortable, especially for those of us that may not love public speaking. or talking to strangers, but sometimes it's incredibly rewarding. I gave a couple of examples in my slide. I think that was what helped me to get my Hess internship. It helped me to get that Windy Cove contracting position. And while it wasn't a true cold call, going up to someone I didn't know at the conference at the Shell booth did lead to my Shell job. So getting yourself a little bit comfortable with talking to people who, you have no context of, who they might be or previous connections. This is a good skill to build up, especially during the job hunt. All right, and then iterate. Job hunting, it is long, it is arduous, and the more times you iterate this, the better your pitch, the better your presentation to other people is going to be. And this is highly important, to be seeking that feedback from people you trust. I know I had the audacity to come here and tell y'all how to job hunt. How many jobs have I gotten? Let's see, Hess, Windy Cove, Conoco. I've gotten 4. Does that really make me an expert? I felt like I was perpetually surrounded by job hunting experts because they got a job. So find someone you trust. Find someone who you're comfortable giving that practice pitch to. Find someone who you trust that you can get them to scan your resume. And then find someone who you trust that can give you really honest feedback. Are you doing everything you can to get your goals? Are you getting out there? Have you taken a look at your resume, a couple of months after your last edit? Is it really saying exactly what you need it to say? Finding someone who can give you that really good constructive feedback, or to play ideas off of. This is highly important. I was fortunate, my partner was really good about being that soundboard for me and being the one who occasionally said, you watch Netflix all week. Were you really, really trying to get a job? But I would say the biggest thing that you have to keep in mind during this whole process of setting yourself up for success, getting out there and then iterating all over again, is all about shots on goal. I can't tell you how many jobs I actually applied to or how many things I thought might turn into an opportunity. But you can see based on my career timeline, only a couple of those panned out. But at the same time, you're never going to make the shots that you don't take. It's a cheesy saying, but it's highly applicable to this whole job hunting process. And then just, one more thing to consider, it's a full-time job looking for a job. I know you guys are students. I know you have so much on your plate trying to do the extracurriculars, build those skills in and out of the classroom. But, definitely as you're looking for full-time employment or internships, make sure to carve out a good amount of time to be taking these steps, especially when it's a bit more challenging. So just a couple more last tips, and then I would really just love to talk and hear what's on your minds. So I'll try to go through this. You guys know this, the industry, the oil and gas industry, it's tough to break into right now. But if this is something that you want, if this is something you've set yourself up for, don't let it discourage you. One of our U of H alum from one of the petroleum engineering master's programs, Hudson Chen, he is an oil and gas recruiter. And something that he told me before I gave this talk last year was, you may have to work twice as hard, but if you show up, then you deserve the job. There's a lot of people who let this, the fact that it is challenging to get a job right now, they say, well, why should I even do it? If you're passionate about this, if this is your career path, then put in the work. And I really hope that it pays off. Also remember, I know that there's a lot of sad messaging in here, but on a bright note, the industry has learned before, that putting in effect these hiring freezes and saying we're not hiring at all does hurt them in the long run. Today's leaders were new hires 15, 20 years ago, and the companies that I've seen definitely saw a skill gap after they had a hiring freeze in the 80s when there was an oil and gas downturn. So it is in the best interest of these companies to at least have some hiring, even if it's not $100 oil hiring. And, you know, another point to say here is that no one knows when the market will come up or what the business needs are for a company. You know, even though things may generally not look great, you don't know exactly what a company needs. So just keep that in the back of your mind as something to push you forward. Stay organized. I had my little Excel spreadsheet. I think that was highly helpful to knowing where I could see jobs that I was really a qualified candidate for. It helped me to compare opportunities and, okay, these people got back to me really fast. These people, you know, I'm still waiting. Just helps you to compare opportunities. And it's really helpful just to see your progress. Where have you been? How are you doing? And just to be able to see where you've been. All right, when you're looking at your spreadsheet, is there a job that you know you're a perfect candidate for? Cold call. Find a hiring manager. Find anyone. Get as close to that hiring manager as you can and chase that opportunity. And even more importantly, be really diligent in follow-ups. In fact, I will say this. I had someone from this discussion last year email me. We had some resume talk back and forth. And I got busy. And unfortunately, I forgot to email him back. He was diligent. He followed up with me. We got a great resume because he did follow up. I was really impressed, and I was not surprised when he emailed me about 6 months later and said, hey, I just got my job and I wanted you to know. That was awesome. Super proud alum moment there. And I think that's the kind of initiative that you've got to sink your teeth into in this process. Invest in yourself. You know, I know we talked a lot about kind of the emotional investment of cold calling. It's terrible. If you can, try to invest in some business cards. Maybe a little less relevant now if there's a lot of virtual connects with COVID, but pay for professional memberships, especially utilize those student discounts, maybe LinkedIn Premium if it fits for you, if it's right for your situation. Job hunting, it's draining. It is really draining. So really take the occasional day off. Don't feel guilty about it. You're going to be your best self when you're energized and recharged. And something I found that was really helpful was volunteering every once in a while. Look for something that's unrelated to your job hunt or just something that's bigger than you, bigger than your job hunt. That might be a great way to just get out of your head. One of my last things is, you know, we're all proud Cougars. You know, we're Houstonians. I'm a Tiger fan. I'm sure there's another one somewhere, maybe in this virtual chat room. But just make the most of your commonalities with people as you're doing this networking thing. And with that being said, I'm here and I would love to connect with y'all. Please find me on LinkedIn. Please stay in touch with me. This is my Shell email. I would love to be here to bounce questions off of y'all. You know, I did have some resume work with one person after last year's talk. And I would love to see where you go. You know, I am really energized to come back to U of H, and I want to see the alumni from my school succeed. So I'm here to be a connection. I'm here to see you guys succeed. So with that, let's just open up the Q&A panel for any questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you a lot for that. I just want to let everybody know that I've gone ahead and allowed y'all to talk. So if you guys have any questions, you could either put them in the question and answer if you don't want to voice it yourself. But I really appreciate that. That was a great talk. And I did find myself initially last year when I heard this, you know, when the market came down or was on a downturn, I was kind of already demoralized or defeated. And you're right. Like if you're not, you can't start off from that point. You need to start off the point of seeking and applying regardless of kind of what is going on out there, or else if you don't apply, you're never going to get it. And
Yeah.
you said that, I was like, you know, you're right. That's a really good point. I took that to heart and I was like, I need to get out there and start hunting them down regardless of, you know, whatever's going on in my life, whatever, if I'm busy, you know, I got to find time. I give myself excuses, you know, not to, oh, you know, it's always easier just to sit back and take these excuses. Oh, I worked all day. You go, all right, well, how long does it take to just do one application? It takes 20 minutes. Okay, you can take 20 minutes and do it. It's, you know, you're investing in yourself when you do that. So I took a lot, I got a lot out of your talk here, and I always appreciate it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's a hard process. You really you set yourself up for a lot of potential rejections, and you end up getting a lot more no's or a lot more maybes than you do yeses. But when you get that one yes, that's perfect and is the thing that jumpstarts your career. It's awesome. That being said, my recruiter friend Hudson, uh, he made a point last year to tell me, getting the job, it's not easy by any means, but it is the easy part because once you get your job, you have to deliver. And so, but I don't at all want to diminish that it can be arduous.
Mhm.
Putting yourself out there and being really vulnerable to hiring managers, as well as trying to figure out your career. A lot of this, if I didn't say it explicitly, is also about learning what you want, and finding opportunities to be able to pinpoint what works for you and what doesn't. I was fortunate to have the Conoco experience that taught me I didn't really like completions, but I'm really satisfied with the geophysics career that I recalibrated into. And so it's okay to make mistakes along the way. Just give yourself opportunities to learn.
Mhm.
Libby, do you mind if we record this Q&A portion?
Not at all. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat or in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand. Oh, it looks like Jacob's got one. So you could do it, Benjamin. I don't think I'm a host. I can't do that.
You should be able to talk,
Can
Jacob.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I did have a question. So I know BP is going through reorg. I think Shell's starting to do a reorganization and maybe some other companies. And they're diversifying into alternative energy. So I was wondering if you could provide some insight onto what roles a geologist or geophysicist could play into this kind of new landscape within these companies on
Yeah.
what roles we could play at that alternative energy sources.
No, that's a really great question. I talked to my manager yesterday. I was like, I'm giving this talk, and he was like, bring up the energy transition. I didn't even have to bring it up. There we go. No, so you're right. So BP, they recently announced that they're not an oil and gas company anymore, but an energy company. And Shell is taking steps, you're correct, to try to position ourselves to be ready for the energy transition. And so there is, I think, a brighter future as far as moving towards that direction. I will caveat this. I am very much in oil and gas. I'm having to learn a little bit about the energy transition. So I may not have the best answer for this. But it is certainly a direction that the energy industry is going in. So what kind of positions are available? So I know at Shell, some of our energy transition futures look like carbon sequestration. So where can you insert carbon into the subsurface, which has a lot of the same skills as drilling a well and trying to take fluid out. It's like drilling an injection well from my understanding. And so having a good understanding of geology, regional geology, reservoir systems in total, this is really helpful for that kind of specific skill set. I think that these are also applicable to geothermal energy, understanding what does your subsurface picture look like? How can we image that subsurface to get a better understanding? There's a lot of really transferable skills that whether you start in an oil and gas kind of energy role or you start in a renewable energy kind of role, I think that there will be a lot of skills that are essentially the same between the two. So I think that there's going to be lots of opportunities for geoscientists as we see companies continuing to move towards investing in renewable energy.
Great, thank you.
I had a question. So with a sales pitch, typically, or what I typically do is just focus mainly on my experience and kind of maybe some knowledge is applicable. But do you, in your opinion, is there anything else in addition to that that is good to maybe include in your sales pitch or your 2-minute talk that could maybe spark more of an interest in the person?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is to understand who you're talking to and what you would love to get out of a conversation. I'm gonna take the assumption that you're talking to a recruiter about trying to get an entry level job. So I think that especially in that position, I will say that I think talking about some of the extracurriculars that you do at your university. I know U of H has had a stellar couple of years with IBA. If you were involved in that, if you were on any of the winning teams, I would absolutely bring that up. If there were, your experience, your internships, any work, any full-time work that you've had, I think is really important. You want to come off as well-rounded. So, sometimes even bringing up a hobby can be a good way to either break the ice or to show that you're kind of that well-rounded candidate, right? Because we're not hiring robots. We're hiring people at the end of the day. So you want a coworker that you can work with. You want to exemplify having, great team behavior skills. You want to demonstrate leadership styles, leadership experiences. I will say maybe the one thing that, especially in an entry-level position, they may not want to hear about as much is your classes that you've taken. I would say that the recruiter, when they hear what school you come from, they will have an idea of whether they want to hire from that school or not. And that's kind of about as much as they really want to know as far as your formal education goes, unless you have a specialty, major, minor. Definitely talk about your research. I think those are great opportunities for you guys to demonstrate your leadership and your special skills. And if you've presented at a conference, I think that's also a great opportunity to highlight that you've practiced communicating, you've practiced synthesizing a project into a really nice, concise story to a broader audience.
Libby, Dr. Sternbach had a question, and he asks, what advice does Libby have for students regarding what kind of topics they should choose for their senior or MS theses?
That's a really good question. Let's see. So what kind of topics should you focus your thesis on? So definitely, I think this goes back to the point of know what you want. If you do have an idea of what kind of part of the industry or another industry altogether, chase that. Give yourself the opportunity to learn how interesting that field is or not, and dive in through a research project. It's if you're a master's student, a 2-year commitment, a PhD student, for a 5-year commitment or so. And so, chase that opportunity to learn more about something you're interested in, and that's something that you think will make you marketable in an industry you'd like to go into at the end of the day. We got that great question from Jacob about the energy transition. I'm not sure what your research is on. If that's something you're really interested in, then look for professors that may have these kinds of opportunities to learn more about that. So I think it's balancing what you want with what's in reach, what's available around your department. And if there are opportunities, companies that have given data to the university that you'd like to be a part of, isn't that a great way to introduce yourself to company X? Hey, look, I did a great job. I synthesized this data that you trusted U of H to work through and to solve this problem. And it's a great way to essentially give yourself that foot in the door I had a friend who was a master's student at LSU. He really wanted a Shell job. So he worked with his professor to get some Shell data. He did some really cool drilling analysis. And at the end of the day, he made enough contacts with the company that he was able to get his foot in the door. So keep that in mind. You know, there's definitely a couple of things to consider: what's available, what you're interested in, and where you want to go.
Thank you.
I see, Jacob, you have your hand raised again. Would you like to ask another question?
I sure do, yes. I was wondering if you had, if you could recall back to when you were doing your interviewing and being recruited,
Yeah.
if there was something you can recall that helped you stand out when you're interviewing or talking with other people.
Yeah, I think so. I would say one thing that helped me to stand out was the confidence of all of the iterations. You know, if I compared job hunting to that post Conoco layoff 2015 to, you know, end of 2017, night and day as far as how I could present myself and tell the story that I wanted. So I definitely think that you should think about what have you accomplished, what have you achieved, and it's really important to be able to bring that all together into a story. I found that the story that made me stand out was, hey, look, I've got a really unconventional background, but I'm going to bring these skills together, and not only that, but I'm going to be a geophysicist as well who knows a lot about wells at the end of the day. I found that being able to tie all of my experiences together made me stand out, not only because I could articulate it really well, but because I was able to see how it all tied in and how it was going to help me to achieve my goals of being a geophysicist working in a development asset where I would be drilling wells, where I would be dealing with integrated teams. So I think, you know, I mentioned a couple of things to Ben about, you know, these are some things you can highlight during those talks, but certainly take a step back and figure out what's the narrative that you need to say to get to your end goal.
Great,
Great.
thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Also like the topic or the point that you brought out that the recruiters that you're talking to aren't just like machines receiving resumes. They're actually humans, and trying to have a conversation with them than just like a sales pitch could also be beneficial than just being like, oh, hey, I did this, I did that. Like, oh, how was your day? Like maybe getting into a hobby. I thought those are some good points.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, at the end of the day, especially like you're at these conferences, these people have been talking to people for hours on end. If you do, you know, Rocky Mountain Rendezvous or any of those really big clustered events where you're talking to a lot of recruiters at once, you know, they're probably going to be tired the later in the day. You know, they don't want to, I will say this is a huge point. No one wants to be treated like a job cow, where you go up, you know, you squeeze the udders and out comes the job. They're people. They want to connect with you, and they really, it's again goes back to that push-pull of, you know, take a look at your room. When's the right time to really say, hey, it's my ambition to work in this role within this company. But also build trust. That's huge. That's important to getting someone to say, you know what, let's let this person, let's take a second look at them, right? And so it can just you know, when you're doing your cold calling, when you're doing your meet and greets and whatever else, some instances you do need to get straight to the point, but others really make sure that you're staying very human and you're not like, hi, I need this job. tell me how I can get this job at Shell, which I've gotten a lot of those. And honestly, I just don't bother to respond to people who don't put in the effort to treat me like I'm a human too.
Yeah, exactly. I like the udder reference. I hadn't heard that before. I thought that was creative. I thought that was perfect. But yeah, so if anybody else has any more questions, please feel free to ask them. If not, we'll be moving to start to close. Just give it a minute for anybody to come forward.
Yeah, and if
I've
you
got
have
one.
questions, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so you spoke on Rocky Mountain Rendezvous, which is a question I had for Dr. Mann recently because, I'm a new grad student, so I don't really have a lot of products built yet. But
Mhm.
those kinds of things are typically great to start socializing, right? But
Yeah.
now you're going to this format where we're like in this room and it's kind of hard for me to talk to someone at Subway, like while we're both getting extra mustard or whatever. So do you have any advice for maybe standing out at some of these conferences?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to hear from y'all. How are they handling some of those very people-dense events in this day and age? Is it virtual, or how have they set those kind of events up?
Sean, are you there? The Wildcatters, or maybe Jacob?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So it's Rocky Mountain Rendezvous. Rocky Mountain Rendezvous is completely online now. They've also gone through the steps of opening it only to graduate students this year.
Okay.
For the Student Expo that used to be held in Houston, as far as I know, that's not happening. That's been replaced by an in-person event.
Ew.
Yeah, I know, at GCAX. That's kind of going to run in conjunction with APG ACE.
Mhm.
But that's it's either online, canceled, or up in the air, I would say at this point.
Okay.
A great talk, by the way. Thank you for
Oh,
coming
great.
by.
Thank you.
I would like to add in real quick to this as well. I did go to an info session here recently, and one of the other formats that they did was it was just like a presentation kind of like this, but then immediately they took the recruiters, put each of them in their own room, and just sent people into lines or queues for each room. So I'm guessing that maybe just be like give you like you wait in a line or queue up, and you don't know until you get thrown in there, and you're just like a one-on-one talk with the recruiter or something with the company. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting.
I think that you guys definitely have a huge additional challenge with not having that person interface. Yeah, I definitely don't want to discount that. How to make yourself, how do you work those kind of environments? So I think something that may help. I often go to events where I remember I would go and get a bunch of business cards, and they would just kind of sit in the drawer until I was like, well, I got to throw out these business cards. I would just be extremely diligent with anyone who does want to say, hi, I'm Libby Ingram Store at Shell. Hi, find the opportunity to initiate. Hey, can we connect on LinkedIn? Hey, can we, do you mind if I get some follow-ups? I'd love to hear about your experience as a geologist working Eagleford. I think you're going to have to, unfortunately, you have to work twice as hard. You're going to have to work thrice as hard, unfortunately. But I think that creating opportunities for yourself to get that a bit more intimate conversation, I think that will help for sure. Maybe one other small tidbit, cameras on whenever you can. It's a little easier to connect with someone when I can see faces. I'm sure your recruiters feel similarly. And then maybe the last point is to put yourself out there. I know that a lot of conferences and things have gone to a virtual format, but if you can find ways to, well, you don't have a talk exactly, Michael, You mentioned that, but if those that do have some research, definitely find as many opportunities to put yourself out there and give some sort of presentation. But I think that you guys are going to have to initiate quite a bit more on the, you know, when you do get those small, very quick interactions, say, hey, I'd love to follow up with you. You know, I think that aside from, you know, saying like, hey, here's my resume, that would be a great way to try to extend the conversation that you might get in the subway. I do see we've got a Q&A question here. What would you consider weaknesses of recent geoscientists? I'd like to just quickly answer this with, I think having the context of why your work is important is something that I've heard at a couple of different companies now. And this is something that I think a lot of new hires have to build up is, you know, why am I, you know, defining this specific structure and what's the ultimate impact? I think especially you're in academia, you're really digging into the details of these projects. And so I think that sometimes there can be a little bit of an awkward shift going to industry where you may not have as much time to dig into details if you're in specific roles. And you've got to be able to understand what's the impact? How does this add to the bottom line at the end of the day? And so looking for opportunities to increase your business acumen or just understanding the context of how your work is going to contribute to something bigger. This is important and definitely something to keep in mind. But there's a lot of great innovation coming out of school right now. I was super impressed with some machine learning projects that I've seen from some of our graduate students that interned at Shell. I know that's really hot right now. It's got a lot of potential as we move into, you know, 2020 and all of the new advancements that are coming in this next decade. And so you guys do bring a lot to the table. Don't forget that. And you get to spend a lot of time, you know, getting exposed to some of this latest and greatest, and the companies, we love to see that.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask Charles this question. His question was, how much research do you recommend on a particular company's property, prospects, and new releases?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so Charles was asking, how much research do you recommend on a particular company's properties, prospects, and new releases?
Charles, I'd love it if you could come online. I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this in a way that gets your question. But certainly I think there's thinking about the context. So when I was at Windy Cove, we did have to do a bit of research on each of our prospects to understand if it was something that they wanted to invest in at the end of the day. And some of those projects were, you know, we looked at for, you know, a grand total of 2 weeks. Others we spent 3 or 4 months on it. And so, and then, you know, I look at some of my Gulf of Mexico projects, and a single well can take a year to look at and to really understand.
Charles, I see you have your hand raised. You should be able to talk.
Thanks, Libby. Yeah, I really appreciate this. This is so well thought out and so helpful. What I was thinking with that question is, for preparing for an interview with a particular company, A, B, or C, how much preparation did you do about learning the activities of company A, B, and C?
Oh, yes. Oh, that is hugely important. Yes. Yeah. If you're going to cold call someone, if you're going to interview with someone, you absolutely need to understand the context of who are they? What are they interested in? What are their company values? And so I certainly, I would spend, certainly I remember for my Shell internship, or sorry, my Shell full-time offer, that entire recruiting process took along the lines of like four or 5 months. It was really long, but in the last week stretch where I had some video interviews, I ended up, I actually had to prepare a technical project for them to go past the final stage gate. And so not only did I need to understand like what my mind would recommend for this technical project, but I needed to understand what Shell thought. And I actually reached out to one of my U of H colleagues, who someone at Hess introduced me to, and I said, hey, you interned with this company. How do they think? What's important to them? And so, you know, how much investment should you put in this? You should put a lot into understanding, especially if you can, you know, almost taste getting a job offer with somebody. Put in the time to get to know employees. Put in the time to find those people who you may have 2 degrees of separation away from, to try to understand those companies. Peruse their websites and see, you know, are they unconventionals? Are they interested in the Gulf of Mexico? Do they have international? You know, I think that that's huge. I'm so glad you asked that question. And it's nice to talk to you again, Charles. I think you saw your picture there a couple of slides ago.
Oh, this is great, Libby. Thank you for doing this.
I'm so glad that you're here in the talk. You were one of the people who encouraged me in my job hunt. So yeah, look how beautiful full circle this becomes.
What amazes me is how much information is online too. I mean,
Yes.
company reports, some new discovery, and there's all about everything. And boy, you can just read up, and when you start talking to somebody about their company, if you're knowledgeable about the things they're proud of, the technology they're proud of, or the new acquisitions, I found it really helps a conversation go well.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps to show, you know, when a company is going to hire you, they're investing in you. And you need to show that you're willing to invest in them, and that you'll continue to, you know, start off strong by investing before your interview and understanding what's important to their business plan as well as their company culture.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we reached the time slot for this webinar, but I'd like to let you know that you gave a great talk, and I really appreciate you coming out and spending time with us at U of H and giving us some good insight into the industry and let us know that it's not so far. Yes. Awesome.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
And guys, I left this last screen up here because I really mean it. I would love to connect with as many of you as would like to reach out. And my virtual door is always open if you want to bounce some ideas off, or if you think of a question later on. I am so proud of what the department puts out. I'm always impressed by the projects I see and the caliber of student that we put out. And I want to see as many Cougars successful as possible. So,
Awesome. Thank you.